Me body increasing, me body keep moving. I must be dance pro, can't stay home no more. Cause my tongue is filled with action, sweet carnival action, and I'm hearing soca music, sweet soca music, playing all around, playing in the top, playing tonight we go party. So make some space for me. Welcome, one and all. I feel like dancing. My name is Len Richardson. I will be your host for today's program. Back in the day, I was one of the first members of the Other Countries experiment. We were smitten with the notion that Black gay men needed to tell their stories with their writings some 35 years ago. It is with great sadness that we are gathering today to honor Colin and his memory. But it is also with great gladness that so many have stepped up to participate from around the world, with the marvels of Zoom making it all possible. Before we begin, let me just say, I knew Colin in those early days of the birth of the Other Countries Writing Collective, those heady days of hormones and hope, and the prospect of legacy, our legacy as Black gay men. We are gathering today to celebrate the legacy of Colin Robinson, our fallen brother, gone too soon, in his words and in the words of those who felt the impacts of his life and living. So welcome, welcome all. I don't recall exactly when we, Other Countries, started celebrating our existence and our work as writers on the occasions of the winter and summer solstice. I do recall someone, maybe Reverend Jean-Marie, suggesting that one winter we should gather to read our work on the shortest day of the year, the darkest day of the year, so that our work and our voices and our energy could brighten the world just a little bit more. It was a bold and provocative idea. So for a number of years, we marked those two seasonal events with a gathering of writers all coming together for the purpose of fellowship, outreach, and the promotion of our stories and lives and dreams. And so here we are. It is with great pleasure that we are coming together again on the summer solstice to honor the life and the works of Colin Robinson. I thank you all for your participation and for bearing witness. As we get started, in lieu of a virtual program bulletin, hey Zoom, are you listening? I'd like to let you know how things will go. First, we will hear from the poets, some reading their own poems, and some will be reading poems and letters from Colin. Second, we will hear from the testimonies of people who knew, loved, and appreciated Colin and his work. Finally, once this part of the program concludes, we will drop a link in the chat to a Zoom reception repast in Colin's honor. And with that said, I'd like to open the program with our first reader. Elizabeth Alexander, poet, educator, scholar, and cultural advocate, is the president of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Alexander. I first met Colin Robinson in September of 1980 when we both arrived at Yale University as first-year students. We lived in the same entryway. Colin had force of life in him from first encounter. He was bright with energy. He was hilarious. He was brilliant. He brought his full self, and he was most often seen in a gorgeous purple velvet cape. With other friends, we had many late night talks, many parties, many glorious times together in that way of people finding the ones they've wanted to talk to forever in a first time away from home. But Yale was not a commodious place for everyone, and Yale was not a welcoming place for Colin. He left at the end of the first semester. His roommates and others were extremely homophobic, and it wasn't a place where he felt safe. I lost track of Colin for many years and was so happy to see years later in my own becoming a writer and an educator, finding things like the Other Countries anthology made by the Other Countries Collective, and seeing his affiliation with Tongues Untied and how he brought that great film into the world, and reading his poetry and reading about his activism and seeing how he was a community builder and how so many of the things that we both cared about had become passionate life's work for him. It was a joy to see that. I found this that he wrote that I think is so important. He talks about doing the work of memory, recording what I remember, and helping others to remember the path I have trodden by leaving better markers for them. And of course, that work of memory is what we need to do with our own lives to understand that none of us ever walks alone, but also when we are on earth and have the precious memories of others who walk this way with us, to share those memories as well. And so I wanted to offer today Colin at 18, his light, his brilliance. It's finding form, it's making community, and how much I wish that we had been able to walk that journey together when we were young people, but how grateful I am to have been in his life a little bit and to have been the beneficiary of the culture that he helped create and support. And so for Colin, this is a poem that I wrote that is for the way that we say the names of the ones that we've loved. And it's called At the Beach. Looking at the photograph is somehow not unbearable. My friends, two dead, one low on T-cells, his white T-shirt an X-ray screen for the virus, which I imagine as a single swimming paisley, a sardine with serrated fins and a neon spine. I'm on a train thinking about my friends and watching two women talk in sign language. I feel the energy and heft their talk generates, the weight of their words in the air, the same heft as your presence in this picture, boys. The volume of late summer air at the beach. Did you tea dance that day? Write poems in the sunlight? Vamp with strangers? There is sun under your skin like the gold Sula found beneath Ajax's black. I calibrate the weight of your beautiful bones, the weight of your elbow, Melvin, on Daryl's brown shoulder.
Next up, we have a change in the program slightly. We will have a presentation from Pamela Schneed. Just give me a second. And Pamela will introduce herself. She is a performer. She is a poet who recently won the Lambda Award in her book, Funeral Diva.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm honored to be here and to come together in Colin's name. And I'm going to read a poem that I wrote for him many years ago. Never thought it would have ended this way or begun. 15 years later, survivors sitting in Popeye's Chicken, downtown Brooklyn. Our coleslaw and mashed potato cups imprinted with "We love chicken." Us sitting quietly for hours, staring into the afternoon out of Popeye's big glass windows. When we first sat down, Colin smoothed his napkin over his lap. I was impressed at how elegant he was for Popeyes. Our gold and silver rings glistening as we ate chicken, brought it to our lips. We, I think, were very unlikely customers, but who would have thought decades later we'd be sitting together in Popeyes, the sole survivors of a generation gone. Our brothers and sisters gone from AIDS and cancer. We came together accidentally through a show that later funding fell through. We determined bravely, without question, as we always had, both separately and together, to go on. That part of the legacy Donald Woods, Essex Hempel, Audre Lorde, Asado Saint, Pat Parker, and Marlon Riggs had left us with was to fight, to never walk away without fighting, through whatever circumstances, to keep going. We had, at least Colin and I, the memory of Asado slamming his hand down on the pulpit at Donald's funeral. We know somewhere inside we must always tell the truth. Colin and I are the witnesses, our tribe's council. We buried each of those men. We saw. And over the years, we haven't spoken much, not even on this project, but today, during a rehearsal, during the recitation of a poem, he grabbed my hand, full of trust and innocence, held on, then let go. And for me, even as a poet, that moment meant more than words. Thank you. Fly high, Colin. I miss you. Thanks.
Thank you, Pamela, for that. Now we will go back to our original order. Up next will be Jafari Sinclair Allen, who is a Black Studies scholar who worked with Colin as a GMAD member and volunteer, and on various projects throughout the years. And also Anton Nimblett, a Trinidadian who writes in Brooklyn, is the author of 2 story collections, Sections of an Orange and Now After. He participated in other countries during the early 2000s. Thank you.
Maricón.
Cuando gritan maricón, yo oigo cimarrón. I remember Michael. We were buddies, sisters that summer of my first return. I remember Michael long before I could conceive him as a friend. I remember Michael dropping curtsy to Bulla, crossing St. Mary's schoolyard. St. Mary's was the other name. I remember Michael's thank you, neutering insult. I remember Michael, we've both survived, we're still alive, apart. So I remember Michael through this story, though truth may vary somewhat. It's this version that becomes the myth for me.
Llamaron maricones, oímos cimarrones y viendo. At this quilombo, we arrived from different places, other countries, cities, villages, plantations, Bantustans, and ghettos, other colonies and nations old and new, from strange lands, but not strangers. We carried tongues like oil and flames of Pentecost that linked and licked the darkness of past wounds and heals and opened holes of memory. In passion, whispered,
Bulla,
Bati,
baby,
faggot,
maricon,
adodi, magic words.
and some were kings and queens of color come from other galaxies whose suns had failed, some wearing black hearts on their cheeks and foreheads, histories twisted in their hair, emblazoned on their eyes, painted on their lips like scars of heritage, brave outriders, trumpets beckoning like Joshua's.
Jimmy,
God free.
Adrian,
Andre,
Essex,
Ian,
Joseph,
Mario,
Eve,
Kelvin. From Babylon, from Babel, coming in procession under canopies of breath, a chain of tongues unchained, we fashion rotten syllables and poisoned metaphor, and broken roots and metonyms of pain, and flickering light, the journey further home.
I remember home. Remembering Michael. I see Miss Ting the Zola hole the other day, the Tiefin hole, in a fete in Brooklyn. Michael, I did not remember him, the queen who ruled our school days. Then remembering, I refused. I'm afraid of forgetting, Michael, forgetting our language, afraid of these new words, not ours.
Gritaron maricones, nos oimos cimarrones. And we came, arrivants, awkward migrants, changing territory, heard our eager muffled voices learn to sing in their full range. Falsettos deepened, basses soared, some uttering first words like gaunda, grunts and groans, gasps and moans, laughs and sighs, shouts and cries, voices echoing, questioning the silence which they slay. Griots shaping language into power, food and substitute for sex, into weapons of survival, rage and passion, with the clarity of spit. Language of retention and of hope.
Daniel, hungry, always hungry. Your hunger like a brilliant knife, touched and left untouched. Donald, Blackheart brother, mentor, and best friend, tossing dreaded head and laughing at my foolishness with Grimke sisters' tales. Sean, my Bati, my beautiful, first double brother. Carrie, tender Banji, breaking hearts. But we have learnt the limits of our love. Yours is quite another poem, unwritten. Laive, arriving like a Loa. Charles in brooding silence. Len no longer flirts. We fashion verses out of clay and sail on champagne seas. Mark, first friend, still friend. Madame Dudu d'Asti d'Afrique's imperial tales of boys. And Alan, who knows the treachery of my love.
Michael, I have grown away from you, from roots, from childhood's sturdy trunk, from branching adolescence boughs, from anchors in the soil of Trinidad. Like seeds arrived in boats, Michael, I have flown away from you, seat belted in the cockle of the jumbo jet, back turned to the Gulf of Paria, a past and future dissipating in the jet stream over Piarco. Michael, I have been away too long, left ripe with promise for a land of promise, with promises to soon come back with more. I feel in all this ripeness, rotting.
Cuando gritan, when they call me maricon, like anti-man, like faggot, batiman, masisi, bulla. Remembering Michael, my ears resound instead with cimarron, echo, maroon, reverberate, maroon. Like steel pan drum beats, maroon, like curdled blood, maroon, like black and lavender when they fuse, maroon, like memory.
Cuando gritan maricon, pervert the language. Oigamos cimarron. The simplest acts are the bravest. Like rearranging syllables is revolution. Rewrite history. We decline the past and conjugate a future, reinvent etymology, grow new roots.
And from this quilombo, I must still return. I must remake my history, remember Michael. Que griten, they will call me maricon, shout bulla, I will curtsy. I remember Michael with the passion that remembering brings. Come like cimarron, cracking my tongue, lashing it free like a whip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Unfinished
you.
business.
What a dynamic duo. Jafari Sinclair Allen and Anton Niblett. Coming up next, we have Cheryl Clarke, who has known Colin since 1983, and she's been in the life since 1973. Cheryl Clarke.
Thank you. And I'm honored to have been invited to do this reading from Colin's work. And I'll be reading from Sojourner. And Colin is the person I called so I could get my copy of it. I think I had to go up to 125th Street to get it. That was okay. And the name of this piece is You Dared Us to Dream That We Are Worth Wanting Each Other. And it is a letter to Joseph Beam. Brooklyn, 30th January, 1989. Dear Joe, thanks for your visit the other night. Sorry we couldn't speak. You seemed restless. I do hope you're happier now, but I still worry about you. You know, that's what I admired you most for. The way you got things done, cut through the bullshit and the drama. While we were still analyzing the situation and discussing the personalities, you did it. I told your mother, Dorothy, that in a card written in a sort of you ought to know tone. I ended it with a line that I'd been rehearsing. Quote, I cannot know a parent's loss, but it seems that our loss was greater than yours, unquote. Not the sort of thing one tells a mother, eh? But people say and do the darndest things in grief. I'm rambling, working out my feelings on the page. Half a poem came after your dream visit, but I gave up. It seems so obligatory to write a poem, and I'm not sure you'd be flattered. We all drove down to Philly together to your funeral. Craig and George and Donald and Jewel and me. We stopped for dinner and drinks, then got lost, ate at Key West. I think that's the place that carded me the first time I came to Philly. They asked us if we were in town for a meeting. Donald drew your name on the paper tablecloth with crayons. I followed suit and drew a book, In the Life. We got to the church late as a result, halfway through the service. It felt cold. Well, it was nice, actually. Darlene did a good job as Reverend, but it was so proper, so polite, too tasteful in a big, cold church with a dreadful sound system. It felt so impersonal. Essex was supposed to fly in from the West Coast, but he didn't make it. Renee flew in from Detroit. Michelle was there. Philip came down from Boston. Cheryl drove from Jersey. Barbara and Beverly both spoke. So did a lot of other people. I wanted to read the poem Essex wrote for you. Quote, "Don't let loneliness kill us." It's been on my answering machine ever since, but I didn't feel appropriate all of a sudden. It seemed all about me and not about you. We still haven't made an opportunity to do your death on our own terms. In fact, it seems as if your death has come and gone. So GCN calls, and I'm thinking, what can I say in the pages of an anti-racist, but all the same white paper? What will I choose not to say? Of course, I said something about the obligatory terrible loss. You know how I feel about canonizing people once they're dead. I remember the seeming cynicism in your tribute to Baldwin in GCN. And now I feel so strange a year later. It's difficult to write too, because I'm still trying to put your death in perspective. We still don't know how you died, alone at Christmas, why you died. AIDS is the official version, but I still need to know. And I'm angry with you. You and your work represented so much that your death is threatening. It threatens to take away so much that we need to believe in, so much that you talked about. One of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately is how fragile all of us in this movement are. With few exceptions, it seems that those of us who choose this activist lifestyle invest in not meeting our own needs, in not taking care of ourselves, in a sort of culture of poverty and loneliness. And it doesn't have to be that way. But how can I talk about that in a tribute? How would I even say it without it sounding like some codependency psychobabble? Remember when I tried that on you and you sent me back to New York? I guess that's a good way to remember you as a metaphor, but not to forget the text and to embrace all the humanity of your life, like an Orisha, a flesh and blood hero. That sounds like a good African way to remember you. To me, your most important work was always those brother to brother essays. What they said was so simple, but so unsaid. Quote, "Black men loving Black men is a revolutionary act." And now I realize that Black men loving Black men is truly an autonomous agenda. not rooted in any particular sexual, political, or class affiliation, but in our mutual survival. That loving each other more than politics or being out or marches or civil disobedience or legislation is what will create the Black gay community in which you have built your home. The ways in which we manifest that love must indeed be myriad. You spoke too of breaking silence, of speaking and exercising not only anger, but hurt. So in my love for you, I must also speak my anger and my hurt. For what legacy is to be found in our silence? So I claim this public space to grieve, to explore my feelings of love and friendship, to say, my brother, man, I loved you. I really, really loved you. And your biggest silence was you didn't talk about loving yourself. But you did enough, baby. You did more than enough. Thanks. Our challenge now is to stand on the shoulders of your words and become the dream. Brother to brother, love, Colin. And I say to Colin, rest enough, dear traveler. You've done your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl Clarke, for that. Next, I would like to invite Alexis DeVoe, a Black queer feminist who has published in multiple genres over the past 4.5 decades.
Thank you, and thank you to you all. It's quite an honor to be in this moment with you, carrying our brother forward. I met Colin through Essex Hemphill. So I'm actually going to read one of Essex's poems. And I'll just say briefly about Colin when I met him in the 1980s. He was always cool. He was always cool. He was always calm. And I'm not sure if that was his Trinidadian or his swagger or both. But I remember him as just always cool, always calm. And I appreciated that. Essex and I were not always cool, and we were not always calm. So this is from Essex's book, Ceremonies, Prose and Poetry. It was published in 1986. American Wedding. In America, I place my ring on your cock where it belongs. No horsemen bearing terror, no soldiers of doom will swoop in and sweep us apart. They're too busy looting the land to watch us. They don't know we need each other critically. They expect us to call in sick, watch television all night, die by our own hands. They don't know we are becoming powerful. Every time we kiss, we confirm the new world coming. What the rose whispers before blooming, I vow to you. I give you my heart, a safe house. I give you promises other than milk, honey, liberty. I assume you will always be a free man with a dream. In America, place your ring on my cock where it belongs. Long may we live to free this dream. Thank you.
Alexis, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to hear from Thomas Glave, who is the author of 4 books and an editor of the anthology, Our Caribbean, a gathering of lesbian and gay writing from the Antilles. Thomas Glave.
Thank you, Len. Good evening, everyone. I want to say that mega talking at the Patois, Jamaica tonight because I know say that Colin is a brethren from the Caribbean, not true? And some of you know say that me is a Caribbean boy, Jamaican American boy, so me I go so. So me think say that for kind of make tribute to the boy or the gal, as you would have said. Mega talking at the Patois, my people them. And so me did write something for him last year, no? And the woman, Angelique Nixon, she said to me, say, come write something, no? For the festival in Trinidad and things. So me write it in the patois, and me I read it to you now. The boy go and write book. So me I talk about the book. Tribute in honor of Colin Robinson. And in book, you have your father, hard head. So me say, hard head, but wait now. Him talk about hard head, but what about him own steel back, spine of steel, and steel stomach? Him true name should have been Steel Boy. Yes, yow, Steel Boy, Steel Brother, Steel Brethren, Steel Gal. But wait, hold on now, hold on. Him should have been, of course, Steel Trinigal. Trinigal, me brethren, me brother, me sister. How you do? Where you do? You still have hard head for true, you know, in the afterlife. Me no say true. Yes, master. But you was always more steel than steel pan. Yes, me I tell you, because me one read your book. You know, me read it and me read it and me read the word them and me hear the music and the truth in your word them there. Yes, me I tell you, truth and music them there. In that book there. But look here now. Me one know say the Trinidad government people them must have did say to themselves, say, after you come back home at Trinidad from American thing, they must have did say, but Lord Jesus Christ. But see ya, the ambassador Bullerman come home for raise one bomber ass clot, rock us with the Kaiser this and the Kaiser that. Next thing you know, say, it will go revolutionize the people them all the way for some bomber clot sexual liberation. So them would I say, but watch him there, watch him. See if him don't go write poetry and think about some bullerman business, as them would I say in Jamaica, batty boy business. And yes, I saw it did go to Ross Clot, Hole. The hard-head boy with him steel back and him steel stomach, and even Jesus Christ have mercy, God, him steel batty hole. Steel batty hole, you know me, I tell you, him did write a book of Bullerman poem them. Poem about this and that, and the horse dead and the cow fat. Bullerman business, Batman business. So look here, no? Him a talk about desire, and I'm not frightened, you know. Them something that Uno say we can't talk. Him talk about it. Him talk about all the private business, the sexual business, the liberation. Yes, him a chat it. So now, look here now, no? Me one have to ask, what kind of brave boy that? What kind of brave gal that? Him is brave to backside. But then, what kind of Trini boy that? May I tell you, him is true Trini from head top to foot bottom. And look here, no? Hear me good now. When him talking in poetry, him a talk to we. When him talk about we. When him talk, that the boy there, that the Colin there, when him a talk true for we. Walk good, brethren. Enough respect. Walk good. Thank you.
Thomas Glave, thank you. I didn't know you had it in you. Next, I'd like to bring up Jewel Gomez. She is a poet and playwright. She's the author of the cult classic Black lesbian vampire novel, The Gilda Stories, which has been in print continuously for 30 years.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Thomas, that was so wonderful to hear the voice. Because that's one of the things I miss from Colin so much, that music of his voice. And it's one of the reasons I want to read the poem of Colin's that I have. Unfortunately, my Bostonian, New York, Oakland voice cannot do any kind of accent. So everybody can keep your voice in their ears. This poem of Colin's, I wanted to read because it brought to mind that Caribbean rhythmic, just sweet and sharp and motion in the voice. So the poem of Colin's is called We Did Not Follow the Hummingbirds, and it was written for Tracy Robinson. The pepper soy sauce is enough to make me sneeze at the parade of large evening dresses through the Chinese restaurant where we are all watching the small screen evening news on TVJ. One waiter is too much. The bartender, too young. Male, dapper, deft. Mine is dark shuffles, pigeon-toed, as if Jamaica between him leg. A middle-aged belly fills out his yellow silk tunic. He does a one hairy-handed trick, decants my red stripe headlessly into the frosted bottle-tilted mug. Someone has done something. The gaggle of open-handed, open-legged boys outside KFC is gone. But one young beggar shows me her hip, cusses her Christian mother. 3 identical pictures hang on my wall at the Wyndham, where a roach hides behind the ice dispenser. My socked soles are grimy after half a carpeted day. The food is frightening. Nothing works well save the charm and eagerness of the housekeeping staff, who, like the waiters, remind me where a nation's richest resource lies. Swooping in yesterday over the Palisades, the 737 mimics the Pelicans. Smoke from the cement factory wafts westward against the hazy mountains toward Dudu's old haunts, where acridity and dog-eaten bodies lingered in the streets last time I landed here. I have always been unreciprocally in love with Jamaica. The unfolding magic of this place of passion, my human rights friend once called the gayest place he'd ever been. Reflected in the shininess of uniformed ebony teenagers' chests puffing up the midday sun, as they have for over 100 years. We break, a convoy of speeding SUVs overtakes my imagination, heard a slow-moving van on the peninsular 2-lane road into a third. I peer forward through the future of my unlicensed taxi, between the baby dreads of a baby dyke and the cornrows of another, with the wheel and X and brakes in her hands, her wheelchair in the trunk, my luggage in the back seat, the hand-powered car she maneuvered through the third world potholes. Welcome to Jamaica. Talking on the patois cell phone, her girlfriend holds to her ear, and my window does not wind down, nor her friends up when she asked, "Do you want AC?" So she pulls over, unbuckles, slides leglessly toward the passenger side, jimmies it up with the same hand that pushes the vehicle forward in the thickening traffic. I give up on ever knowing how to reckon my way around Kingston, the Jamaican spirit. But I know this is not the scenic route. We did not follow the hummingbirds. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. We miss you.
Thank you, Jewel Gomez. And with that, we'd like to bring up Andel Gosine. Andel is an artist curator and professor of environmental arts and justice at York University in Toronto, and was appointed by Colin as steward of his archives and literary work. His forthcoming book, Nature's Wild, includes a chapter focused on Colin's activist work and will be launched in New York in October 8th as a celebration of Colin's 60th birthday.
Thank you, Len. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the organizers, and special greetings to Colin's sister, Charmaine, who is with us watching the program right now. I've been in conversation, yes, lots of love to you, Charmaine, from all of us. I've been in conversation with Colin since we met in 2007, just after he had gone back to Trinidad. And while we always, we talk very regularly, most often about politics and Calypso, but a couple of years ago, I got him to talk a little bit more about his childhood experiences growing up in Trinidad. And part of that is rendered in the project that Len mentioned. But recently I came across Colin. Colin had mentioned talking about his childhood made him begin to write different pieces. And I came across a recent writing of his that speaks to that. So I thought I'd share this with you today. One carnival season morning in 1977, around 3 a.m., a well-known Calypsonian and school teacher heard a knock at his door. He'd not too long turned the car off the main road and walked the few short blocks to his door. He wondered if someone had taken notice of his arrival. So despite the hour, he answered. Outside was a student in one of his fifth form classes, which he'd arranged to attend the tent he sang in much earlier that evening. He hadn't noticed the teenage figure standing at the junction when he passed, nor did he know how long he had waited in the light there, dismissing the taxis, dipping their lights to signal potential passengers. Sitting inside, the pupil handed the teacher a handwritten sheaf of a popular love song lyric and poems in which he was surprised to see his name appear repeatedly in dedication. The Calypsonian drove his student home, later spoke with the mother, and visited the home for dinner one weekend. He became part of a plan. This was not her first embarrassment. The unusually bright young man had solicited his Sunday school teacher similarly in primary school, framing his desire as being for a father. It began to make sense to her one morning in Form 2, when I woke up after spending the night in my mother's bed, burst into tears, and confessed that I was homosexual. Homosexual was a noun, not an adjective. Not only was my pubescent desire unmistakable and singular, it had a name. My mother's words in response are fascinating, sharing through my drying tears that it was her separation from my father that had put me at risk for this, as it had his sister, though thankfully she had been spared, but I had not. I'm not sure whether to credit the in-service diploma in education course. My mother was among the first class of teachers enrolled at UWI. She has never been good at empathy. She didn't beat me, shame me, punish me. I've always been focused there. I never thought to ask her what she intended to do with those words. Thank you.
And Bill, thank you. And thank you for preserving Colin's work. At this time, I would like to call up our next reader, G. Winston James, who is a writer, editor, and former member of the Other Country's Gay Men's Writing Collective.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me. I met Colin, I think, in 1986, a year after I got to New York for college. And I'm going to read tonight Left Hand Drive from You Have Your Father Hardhead. And I think I chose this poem because over these 30 or so years, it's been much easier for me to sort of think of and interact with the activist Colin, the intellectual Colin, the administrator Colin, and in that same breath, sort of missing the person Colin. So I like that this poem is about desire and things that I don't often think of when I think of Colin. So again, Left Hand Drive with Yin. It starts in this aimless, unplanned way that you've got this sixth sense is going to be trouble. Sunday night, sharing high school memories. Then all of a sudden, he's in control of the wheel. The ocean's a spit away, and you're a passenger in the middle of something risky and exciting. And you trust the guy. Well, you want to, though you're telling yourself this is something your mother would tell you to stop, that it's your life at risk. But you don't want to be a chicken, and it's breathtaking. And you try hard to relax the clench of your fists, but it'll be over if you just hold on. And you shouldn't close your eyes. And it's rougher than you thought. And oh my fucking God, you hear his car screech and lurch, and your heart is pounding, and you hold his arm and beg him to slow down. And he's done and pouting. And you tell him to take you home, but it's not over yet, because you're still there stuck next to him all the way. And this was not that much fun for you, but you find yourself strangely grateful. And this is so like nothing else that you can't put meaning to it. And you keep wanting to look at his face to find the explanation. And you hop off, say awkwardly, it's been great. And he promises you'll hang out again. And you want to be angry. He could have hurt you. And you think this is so childish. You realize this is middle age, and you refuse to let on that this danger is erotic. But he must know. And even if you try to deny it, he knows, whether because of or despite your silence. And you think you won't repeat it, but you never can with the first time. Rest in creativity and courage, Colin. Thanks.
Thank you for that, G. Winston James, and that particular perspective on Colin. I'd next like to call up John Keene, who is the author and co-author and translator of a handful of books and teaches at Rutgers University, Newark. John Keene.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It's an incredible, really incredible honor to be here with all of you and to be in, I guess, just soul to soul with Colin in tribute to him. I met Colin, I think, over 30 years ago through one of our mutual friends, the late Gerard Ferguson. And I just want to mention another side of Colin. The first three, was sort of thinking of the first few terms, first few words that come to mind when I think of Colin, and they're brilliant, fierce, and generous. But the very first time I met Colin, we sat in our partner and I's living room in Dorchester, and we kikied. He could laugh and make you laugh and gossip, and I mean I didn't know half the people he and Gerard were talking about, but was drawn right in, and I don't want us to forget that aspect of Colin either. He was very real. He was a very real funny and loving person. A few weeks before he left us, we were actually strategizing about trying to get Donald Woods's work into print. And that's another thing. I mean, I think Elizabeth mentioned this, and all of you have mentioned this in various ways. His devotion to community, to creating community, to preserving Black, gay, Black, queer voices, and to extending that legacy. So, in tribute to Colin, I'm going to also read a poem from you have your father Hardhead. I had to think about that. So you have your father Hardhead, and that I feel like speaks specifically to those conversations we were having, all the way back and then very recently. And it's called Many Returns. For us, there is only the living. That is all we have left. Later, one of us will reap memories in the other's death. He will wonder which the luckier. Now we wonder only which will wonder. Ours are simple, urgent choices. My list is short. The list of us is long. Life. Number one, life. Number two, love. Number three, touch. Number four, conversation. I have no fifth. Do you? Perhaps a cure. I wish you only happiness. I cannot wish you health. Soar, Colin, and thank you always, and many returns.
Thank you for that, John. I'd next like to invite Rosamond S. King to come up. She is a writer and artist who aspires to be, like Colin, a director of imagination.
Good night, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm going to read the Arenophile by Colin Robinson, also from his collection of poems, which if you have not ordered it yet, please do. You make me laugh out loud, down at the ocean's edge, desperately recarving your name into the wet shoreline after each wave. I bent over, amused at your short-sightedness. It made you beautiful, humble. Though I was hardly surprised, you had never noticed we had all followed you there, each planting his feet in your footsteps, together digging up trenches in your wake, with the large letters of your name following your scent on the trail of your whispers. You wanted a memorial in sand, a castle on the littoral to lie defeated in your shallow imagination, with the confused hatchlings, the dead starfish and flotsam, the mermaid's limbs, the broken nets, clueless to the tattoos of your lips and toes and fingertips, on a throng gathered where the sand turned back into firm ground. The ooze of our bloody hearts manuring the crops you had planted against the skyline of hearths and schools and factories. You cursing the tides and the dirt. We cursing the gods' blindness. Thank you to Stephen and Kevin and other countries and everyone present for doing this memory work together for Colin.
Thank you so much for that. I next would like to call up Cheryl Boyce Taylor. She is a poet and community leader, the author of 5 collections of poetry: Raw Air, Night When Moon Follows, Convincing the Body, Arrival, and Mama Fife Represents, which is about the life of her son, hip hop legend Malik Fife Dog Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. I am so pleased to be here. Thank you for having me. And I want to thank all the organizers and my esteemed colleagues. I met Colin, I think it was the late 80s. And if all you know him, you know he have big mouth. He don't put water in his mouth to say nothing. He just say whatever he wants. Either you like it or you lump it. But we had a wonderful relationship as poets and of course as Trini nationals. I remember I lived in Queens at the time, and I remember coming to Brooklyn to see Colin, and he had, this was many years ago, before this was popular, but he had a gay flag hanging out of his window in Brooklyn. I don't know if anybody else remembers that, but I remember that very well. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want. So I moved from Queens to Brooklyn. So this poem is a dedication to Colin. As I said, he never put water in his mouth to say nothing. So I want to read this poem that I've written not that long ago. It's called Don't Look Back. Don't look back. He put down the pen, pick up the spine, close the poem over and over again. When your friend's voice goes missing, find some kind of repetition. Find some fresh cut iris to fill that space. A ripe mango, a purple or blue pansy. Call him to come chat with you. This can be scary, but paint that wish again. Try that poem, try that call. When you reach the heart, leave it there. Let the reader fall off the cliff if they choose to. Just don't look back. When did the world stop being ours? There is nothing that we own but our good intention. I woke up morning after morning missing my brother. Soon I decided not to sit in that clutter, but to wake peaceful, to patch my heart, to sew it back, to fill the jars of my arms with honey, to relearn the use of love. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl Boyce Taylor. And with that, that concludes our section for the readers. Next, I would like to start to call up the testimonials with none other than George Bellinger Jr., who is a native New Yorker, healthcare educator, and community activist who has championed the issues and rights of communities of color, specifically Black gay men, for over 40 years.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody. This is a complete honor and joy. My heart is full. So many things go through my mind when I think about Colin. And I met Colin as well in the 80s, but I was living in Washington, D.C. And he came down to visit his boyfriend, who was living in D.C. And we were doing a reading at Thurlow Tibbs Gallery. And Colin showed up that evening in a classic business suit, which he called his Winnie Mandela collection. He had on a business jacket and a long skirt, and of course, sensible shoes. I was appalled and elated at the same time. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. But he was my first introduction to other countries. This is actually before other countries started. I think this was in 1985. And when I moved back to New York, that was my first, he was one of the first people I reached out to because I had been doing things in DC as a healthcare worker and AIDS activist, but had not been really involved in the gay life or activism in New York. One of the first things I do remember was other countries was doing an event at Midtown 43. And Colin got me to choreograph Charles Pouncey's poem. And I had a group of male dancers that danced to this poem, and it was well received. But then there was another poem that Colin did a solo to, and he had me dance a solo in nothing but a dance belt, which is a little thinner than a jock strap, and carry a jar of Vaseline, because that was symbolic to one of the lines in the poem. I think that was my first introduction to the group of other countries, and that's how many of them knew me in the early days. As time went on, Colin and I were both members of GMED, and we both served on the first initial board of GMED, along with G. Winston James and Bert Hunter, as well as Harold Robinson. And one of the things I bring that up is because both Harold and Colin had the same middle and last name, Harold McNeil Robinson and Colin McNeil Robinson, though they weren't related. So it was really, really interesting how they came together. Colin, as Cheryl just said, Colin's mouth was fierce. It's so funny that, because I remember some of the tumultuous GMAD board meetings when we had discussions in the early days that we would never do in front of people, but in either my house or Elle's house, it got very, very heated.